Profile is presented by Ins Group, Insurance and Benefits. Today on Profile, Steve Brosvik, General Manager, Houston Symphony. So Steve, tell me a little bit about your background.
I grew up in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, and so as you can imagine, this is a little bit of a climate shock for me. It's a little warm here, but we deal with it. But before coming here, I grew up in Minneapolis, spent a little bit of time in New York studying, finished a music business degree in St. Paul, and then was awarded a management fellowship with the American Symphony Orchestra League. In that fellowship program, I was with the Houston Symphony, Kansas City Symphony, and stayed there for 6 years in Baltimore. Left there, went to San Antonio for 3 years, and then came here.
When did you first realize that you were interested in music?
Well, I had played piano since I was 5. So I'd grown up doing that. When I was studying in New York, I was studying piano and teaching. And I woke up one morning, went into the practice room, getting ready to look at another 5 hours by myself in that room. And I said, you know, today it just felt like I punched a time clock. And I never wanted my playing to get that way. So I figured, you know, I can't leave this. I've spent my life doing this, and this is what I know I want to do. But how do I kind of morph that into something that won't feel like I'm kind of making a sacrifice every day just to do what I want to do? So I started looking around, and I found this music business degree at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. And I had done a little bit of pre-music degree work on a business degree, and I said, this is perfect. And somehow everything just kind of clicked for me. I went through the course catalog and I said, every bit of this seems interesting to me. So I finished that degree. And one of the classes in that degree program was just a music business class. And we had 2 classes a week. And at every single session, we had a lecture speaker from some different branch of music business. So recording companies, orchestras, music publishers, teaching, everything. And the one that really sunk in for me was orchestra. Managing orchestras. So here I am. So here we are in the lobby, and actually outside you can see a couple of buses lined up already. We're just ending one education concert for elementary school kids, and in about, 4 minutes, 2,700 kids are streaming out, and then we'll have another set of buses come and fill it up again and do another concert.
What does a GM of a symphony do? Huh?
It's a good question. It's a very general title. A lot of it is artistic planning. It's all the operational work runs through my office. So anything that goes on the stage here at Jones Hall or elsewhere, wherever the orchestra is appearing, runs through our department. So we've got operational work. The musicians are part of this department. So maintaining their contract, maintaining the relationship with the kind of the collective group of musicians and the individuals runs through our department. All the education activities, stage crew activities, a lot of budgeting. So that you've got the whole management side of being able to run a business and make sure that you hit budget, create that budget, making big decisions every day about what do we purchase, what do we rent, what can we live without, how do we create this program which is really spectacular for this much money. And then you've got to balance that with all the artistic questions. Our goal every day in this department is to make sure that the musicians only have to think about creating great music. So we've got to think of everything behind the scenes. The chairs, the stands, the lighting, the sound, making sure all the rehearsals are scheduled appropriately, getting all of that detail out of the way so that they can come in every day and just focus on the music.
How large is the Houston Symphony organization in total?
Well, our annual operating budget is about $24 million. And we run about 200 concerts or events every single year. We have a staff of around 55 to 60, and we've got 89 musicians in the orchestra. But then on top of that, we've got contract work for usher companies and EMTs and the housekeeping staff, everybody who is required to make a concert happen and have a great atmosphere for our audience and the musicians. So there's a lot of activity that goes on here.
How was that transition for you from musician, and seeing things kind of as an artist, to, again, now, really being the business part? Was that a difficult transition for you?
It can be. I think for me it was easier than it might be for many people because I knew once, as I said, once I saw this degree program and started working through it, I knew that this was the right decision for me. And while I miss playing a lot, I don't look back on making, I don't make any second guesses of that decision. But it's a real question of balance every day though. And it's a good question because every day we need to balance that artistic side with that business side, and that helps us make the decisions that we need to make. And sometimes they're very difficult. Sometimes you have to, say this is what I absolutely think we should be doing artistically, but if we don't have the resources to be able to make that happen well, then you need to find, what's that right compromise that will, kind of feed both of the goals and balance that issue.
You've been in the musician's role, so do you think it gives you an advantage of how you see things, from their side? And do you think the musicians have a greater, appreciation for somebody? Okay, he gets it because he was one of us. He's not like a coach of a team who's never played the game, if you will.
I think absolutely. I think it's necessary for this job. I've sat in not here, but I've sat in finance committee meetings elsewhere, where somebody actually says, well, why do you really need 3 bassoons for that piece? Can't you just do it with 1 or 2 and save that money? And you've got to be able to talk through that and explain it and understand it, and because questions like that inevitably come up. You've got financial challenges, which every arts organization in the country does right now. We're sitting here and coming out of a recession, and we've got to balance everything and cut and trim, and like everybody else does in a for-profit business. But you've got to be able to talk through those decisions and bring everybody on board. And I think without that knowledge, you just can't do it.
Is there a set number of musicians that you need for a symphony?
Not really. There is, based on every single piece of music that you perform. And you have variations actually even within that. The St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, that was the first orchestra that I actually did some work for. Started in college and then stayed on for a little bit. That's an orchestra that runs with 34 musicians, and they do really well. But they can kind of play music up through the beginning of Beethoven symphonies, and then they have a lot of brand new music commissioned for them. They can't perform Mahler and Bruckner and Brahms and a lot of the big orchestral works that we're able to do because we have the sheer size of force of musicians. But every individual piece is written for a different number of bassoons or clarinets or flutes. And then once you know those other instruments, the brass and the woodwinds and the percussion, then you have to balance the number of string players you have just to make sure that they're heard. So that it's balanced within every piece.